So it's gonna be like, I think you're gonna be here. Oh, where's this?
Well, who's the front camera? Much better, 'cause I can see. Okay. I can be here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alan. Welcome to Telespark. We're excited for you to join us this morning on another adventure. We are excited to be joined by Fiona from Dinosaur Provincial Park in their visitor center. And Fiona and friends are going to give us an exciting tour of some of the amazing stuff that they've got out there at Dinosaur Provincial Park, which if you haven't visited before, put it on your bucket list. It is one of my favorite places to go. It is amazing. You can see fossils, not just in the visitor center where Fiona is right now, but everywhere. It's amazing. Very, very cool. Again, if you haven't been there before, make sure it's on your list of things to do. Now, Fiona and friends are going to give us a little bit of a tour, play a game with us, some interesting stuff. But if I remind you that if you have any questions, submit them in chat for us, and we will get those to Fiona and her colleagues at the end of their session. So again, please send us your questions through chat as we go. With that out of the way, again, I'd like to introduce Fiona from Dinosaur Provincial Park in their visitor center live as we speak. Fiona, how are you this morning?
I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I'm looking forward to this, and as are my two little dino buddies here. So without further ado, let's hand it off and take it from here. Thanks, Fiona.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Fiona, and I'd like to welcome you to Dinosaur Provincial Park. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the very cool Cretaceous critters that could be found here at Dinosaur Provincial Park in our fossil record. And to begin, I'd like to introduce you to paleontology technician and park interpreter, David Lloyd.
Hello, everyone. So my name is David. This is my 9th summer working here as an interpreter at Dinosaur Provincial Park. Before I started working here, though, I got to work on this really, really cool skull. This is a skull of a dinosaur called Styracosaurus. So it was one of the horned dinosaurs that we found here at the park, and there's a little toy model of it. You've got that cool frill with the big spikes on it. So Styracosaurus is really closely related to another dinosaur you might have heard of if you've been to the park. This is Centrosaurus. We have a Centrosaurus bone bed hike. So you can see they both have the big spike on the end of their nose. Styracosaurus also had little horns over its eyes. This one's a bit of an older specimen, so the eye horns have reabsorbed a little bit. And then it had these really big spikes off the back. As you can see, I don't know if you can tell in the image there, but looking through the eye, the whole right side of the face is missing. So it had been on the surface for quite a while, and there were lots of pieces of bone that needed to be puzzled back together. So I spent about 14 months cleaning away all the rock and gluing pieces back together. This whole bit here below the eye, right there, that's all puzzled together from pieces that were found in bags that were brought in with the specimen. And then all this bit took a whole bunch of work to try and puzzle it back together. So a lot of that was looking at the surface texture and how the pieces fit together. Sometimes it was, you know, a colleague would wander over and be like, oh, this piece goes here. So there was a little bit of a team effort too on that one. So it was a fun project. It was like working on a puzzle where you have a general idea of what the specimen is supposed to look like, but sometimes the pieces have to go together in the right order in order for things to fit properly. Now, I don't know if you can tell from this angle, but this one has two big spikes on the side of its frill. You can see there's a base of one right there, and then there's the big one there. But Styracosaurus is often depicted as having 3 big spikes on each side of its frill. So as we've learned more about these guys, more of them have been coming out with just the 2 spikes. And that led a researcher to look back at the early specimen, and he realized that the first specimen that the species was described from, half of it was reconstructed, and there was a weird anomaly on the side of the frill that was interpreted as being the base of the 3rd spike. So you often see Styracosaurus now depicted as having the 3 big spikes, but most commonly it's found with just the 2, and there have been some cool new ones that are a little bit younger that have been found with just the single spike sticking off the back. So there's all sorts of new cool information that we're still learning about with these critters here at the park. So these guys were plant eaters that had this parrot-like beak at the front of the mouth, and then they had these kind of slicing teeth that they used to slice up the plants that they were eating. And next, we're gonna move over to Fiona, where she's gonna talk a little bit about dinosaur feeding and teeth.
Oh, great. Hello again, everybody. So behind me, you can see a terrifying scene. A pack of small meat-eating raptors called Dromaeosaurus are attacking a very large hadrosaur called Lambeosaurus. So Lambeosaurus, like Styracosaurus, was a plant eater, and we know that because of its teeth. Hadrosaurs are also referred to sometimes as duck-bill dinosaurs, and this is because they have a duck-like bill on the front of their face. So they could use this bill to grab leaves off of plants and pull them into their mouth, where they would use their flat teeth to grind these plants down. So you can see here an example of the flat teeth of a hadrosaur. So this would be the chewing surface right here. So cows and other modern plant eaters have similarly flat teeth for grinding down plants, but hadrosaurs like Lambeosaurus had a very unique adaptation. They were able to continuously replace their teeth throughout their lives. So every 90 days or so, once they ground their teeth down to pretty much nothing, they would pop them out and a new tooth would grow in its place. And this could happen over and over again throughout its life. So unlike us, who only have baby teeth and adult teeth, these dinosaurs had many, many sets of teeth. Can you imagine how busy the tooth fairy must have been during the late Cretaceous? So Dromaeosaurus, the small raptor dinosaur, it was a meat eater, and we know that again because of its teeth. Its teeth were perfectly adapted for eating meat. They were sharp, small, and serrated like a steak knife. So they would have been absolutely fantastic for slicing through a meaty meal. But there was no one better for eating meat in the late Cretaceous than a large, terrifying tyrannosaur. So one of the scariest dinosaurs we had here in Dinosaur Provincial Park during the late Cretaceous was Displetosaurus. So Displetosaurus's teeth, similar to the Dromaeosaurus, were sharp and serrated. So they too were very good for eating meat. But we know that this dinosaur could easily take down a large hadrosaur like Lambeosaurus. And we can tell this because we even find tooth marks occasionally on the fossilized bones of hadrosaurs. Okay, so now we know a little bit more about some of the animals that lived here in the late Cretaceous period. I'm going to take you now to my friend Lois in the Paleontology Prep Lab, and we have a little bit of a quiz for you. So let's go there.
Hello, welcome to the Fossil Prep Lab. My name is Lois. I'm an interpreter here at Dinosaur Park. And while the exciting discoveries of fossils are made out in the field, often the more significant discoveries are made right here in the Fossil Prep Lab, as these fossils are uncovered and more details are made available. And what I get excited about, besides just amazing dinosaur fossils, are some of the connections that these fossils can help us make between the ancient and modern world. So if you're willing to
Yeah. Oh, Lois, sorry, this is Alan. We've got some sound difficulties. You've gone mute for a moment, so let's just work on rectifying that. Hold tight with us, everybody. A little bit of technical difficulties. Maybe it's the wind. Now, Lois, go ahead now. I think we can hear you clearly.
Okay, so am I starting over?
Maybe if you don't mind, that would be helpful. It got very sort of foggy sounded somehow.
Okay, am I clear now?
It's a little bit airplane hangery, but it's better than it was.
We're in the Fossil Prep Lab, so it's a bit of an echoey place, and it sounds like there's a fan running at the same time. But we'll see what we can do here. So welcome to the. Even though the exciting discoveries are made out in the field, often the more significant scientific discoveries are made right here in the lab as these fossils are prepared. And about the kind of connections they can make on the fossil record to the modern world in which we live. So if you're all ready, we're going to play a little bit of a guessing game so we can help you learn how to make your own connections. So are you ready to go? Let's see what we can do here. The first thing I have in my secret box here is something that is hard. Here for school. Size from pea size to volleyball size. Get it out yet? This one will surely help you make it. It's an egg. So I have here an egg from a modern bird. Fairly good size. Dinosaurs, even up to the really, really huge ones, also laid eggs. The largest dinosaur is called Archaeopteryx. It ranges as an adult from 30 to 40 meters. This is a huge animal. Very large for an egg, about twice the size of this ostrich egg. Just to think about. So, for my second mystery item. Here we go. These are light and soft. And they're also found on modern creatures. They can control body temperature. Creatures fancy for fun. If you guessed, feather, you are correct. Yes, dinosaurs even had feathers. Dinosaur feathers were mostly the downy feathers that they used to keep themselves warm or cool. You might have some of those down feathers in your jacket to keep you warm on your way to school or to work. These downy feathers eventually evolved into flight feathers so that our modern birds can fly. We have evidence of feathers in the fossil record. On this animal like this, Archaeopteryx, is a very, very rare fossil. We only have a cast of this fossil here in our park because so few of them were found on Earth. And we see evidence of the imprints of feathers that were attached to this very, very small dinosaur. Now, we didn't find Archaeopteryx here at Dinosaur Park, but we did find a feathered dinosaur here called Ornithomimid, or bird mimic dinosaur. And this dinosaur was about the size of a modern ostrich. Now, the remarkably well-preserved specimen we found of Ornithomimid here at the park looked just like this. It was one of the best preserved specimens of this animal ever found on Earth. But initially, we did not recognize the evidence of feathers on this particular fossil. It was only when another well-preserved specimen of Archaeopteryx, Ornithomimid, the other guy, the bigger one, was found near Drumheller with evidence of feathers that caused our paleontologists to go back and have another look at this specimen, at which point they discovered attachment points for feathers on the bones of this animal. So again, amazing discoveries found right here in a fossil prep lab, just like ours. Well done. I have one more mystery item in my box. And if you were listening carefully to Fiona, you might have already got some clues about this one. So let's get this one going. These things were sharp and shiny. You have 20 to 32 of them in your mouth. And the one I have in here is the size of my thumb. So if you're all showing out teeth, you're exactly right.
Sorry to interrupt. Sounds just went really, really choppy there again. So maybe if we could just give it another try, just in case.
I review my big reveal. You're talking about teeth, like this one. So this is a tooth from a large meat-eating dinosaur found right here at the park called Bonosaurus. It's a serrated tooth. And as Fiona mentioned, these dinosaurs replace their teeth over and over and over throughout their life. That seems like a great idea. Why don't we need to have lots and lots of sets of teeth? We think mostly because the enamel on our teeth is about 10 times as thick as the enamel that the dinosaurs had on their teeth. So we needed to have lots and lots of them to last through their lifetime. I have one more thing to put out of my mystery box. I don't know, it's kind of a trick. They actually pull it out of here. Oh, yes. Thank goodness we are successful. So this is a jawbone from Bonosaurus, and you can see the various sizes of teeth left in this jawbone, showing various different stages of growth. In fact, there's one completely missing right here. We think this animal might have lost this one as it was munching on a hadrosaur. So again, just one more of the exciting fossils we find here at Dinosaur Provincial Park, helping us make amazing connections to the modern world. So we're going to welcome some questions from you now. You've got lots of things on your mind. And we're going to move back into the gallery so that you can see some exciting dinosaurs. And hopefully the sound is a little better out there as well.
Fiona,
Yeah.
we were still getting a lot of background noise, which, as you stop now, seems to have disappeared. So maybe go ahead, because yeah, there's a lot of background static happening.
Just moving our cars. Should be good now.
Still happening. Is there? Are you guys using a plugged-in microphone at all? Weird.
Technology is weird. Here, perhaps if I mute and unmute it.
Let's try that. And thanks for bearing with us, everybody. And I do need to let you guys know lots and lots of questions are coming in. So very exciting for the end of this. But let's go ahead again, see if the sound is any better. Still a little bit, well, it's quite tinny. There's when you guys are speaking, we're hearing a lot of static along with it.
It's due to a magical internet connection here.
This might be the fun of live, not quite TV, but live broadcasting. Well, let's go ahead and we'll do the best we can. And for those in our audience, thank you for bearing with us as we try to rectify this as we can.
So, going ahead with some questions.
All right, I'll start slinging questions your way. The first question we've got that came in from Lily at the very beginning was how many different type of dinosaurs used to live in what is now Canada?
Canada. That's a good question. I know there have been 59 different species of dinosaurs that have been identified from Dinosaur Provincial Park itself. But as far as Canada.
Well, how long were dinosaurs alive for, Dave?
Dinosaurs we're on the planet for about 160, 180 million years. And we got some of the mostly exposures from the late Cretaceous here. So we have about 1.5 million years represented here at Dinosaur Provincial Park. And that's 59 different species that we know of so far.
So if you had to guess how many dinosaur
there
species?
could be probably thousands.
Well, I guess a question that comes along with that are obviously Dinosaur Provincial Park is in a wonderful space where there were an awful lot of dinosaurs. Are there any other dinosaur hotspots in what is now Canada?
There's lots around Drumheller. It's almost as fossiliferous as here. There is a bone bed of another ceratopsian dinosaur called Pachyrhinosaurus up by Grand Prairie. There's sort of there was a shallow seaway cutting the continent in two during the late Cretaceous, and all along the western coast of that seaway, there was places where you can find dinosaurs. So Edmonton, all through up into Alaska and down into Utah and Montana and down into Mexico even. So.
But remarkably, East End, Saskatchewan is a fantastic place to find those sort of end of Cretaceous celebrities like Triceratops and T-Rex.
Ah, cool. The ones that everybody's familiar with. We've got an excellent question here from Cedar Bray School. So clearly we've got more than one person, maybe a whole class involved. What tools do you need to dig up a dinosaur?
We use a lot of variety of tools. There's lots of rock to get through. We'll use jackhammers and generators. We got these electric jackhammers we use. They're great. As we get closer to the fossil, we use smaller tools like rock hammers, which this is not. This is a regular hammer, but we use brushes. So you always want to be able to see what you're working at. You don't want to hammer away. And when we're really close doing fine detailed work, we'll use dental picks even, or chisels, all sorts of things that we'll use.
Sometimes we like to joke that the people who go into paleontology didn't get through dentistry school. So they use a lot of things like toothbrushes and dental picks to get their fossils out, but it's just a joke.
So it sounds like you start very coarse with the tools and then get more and more and more careful the closer you get.
Exactly. And usually when we take the fossil back to the lab, we take it back in as much rock as reasonably amount of rock that we can, because we want it to be light enough to carry, but we also want that rock to help hold the fossil together. And then once we're in the lab, we can work at clearing away and getting the pieces all cleared out of the rock. So we use very fine detailed work.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And just to refresh our audience, how long did you say you worked on the skull that we saw at the beginning?
That one was about 14 months.
14 months. So that's longer than a year. So wow, that's a lot of work. So it's not the type of science that you can rush.
No, exactly not. Yeah, it's definitely requires a lot of patience.
All right. So we've got a question here from Toby who asks, were dinosaur horns made of bone?
They did have a bony core, but then they had a keratin sheath over top, kind of like if you've seen a cow horn, it would have been a thing like that. So that on that Styracosaurus, there's that bony core, there would have been a bony core, and then it would have been covered by a keratin sheath.
Oh, fantastic. Very interesting. Trish wants to know, and maybe each of you could answer this question separately, what is your favorite fossil?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I mean, that skull that I worked on, that Styracosaurus skull, but there's so many cool things like that. There's that nodosaur that was found up north of Fort McMurray, where they've been able to learn so much cool stuff from that dinosaur. That one's up there too. It's tough to pick.
I think my favorite fossil is the tail club of an ankylosaur. So these are heavily armored dinosaurs covered in bony armor. Even their eyelids have armor on them, but their tail clubs could be really big and they could swing them with enough force to break the leg of another dinosaur. But if I had to choose a fossil that I found, I really liked finding dinosaur teeth.
Oh, again, tough question. I also love finding dinosaur teeth, maybe because generally they're small. So when you find one, it's like finding a real treasure. And I have some specific teeth that are my favorites. But the favorite thing that I found all by myself, well, Dave was there, but I spotted it in the hillside, was a chunk of bony armor from one of our armor-plated dinosaurs called an osteoderm. And when I first saw it, it just looked like a rock, but on closer examination, all the details came out. And that was probably the most excited I've ever been finding a fossil.
Cool. So here's a question from Lily. Dave, with respect to probably the little guy that you were holding, and might extend to the ankylosaur, if I said it right, club that you mentioned, Fiona. Did those animals use the spikes and or the club tail to defend themselves?
Well, these guys, I don't know if you notice when at the skull, but the bony frill is very, very thin in parts. Like there's parts where it was about that thick. So probably wasn't very good for defense. That one was more for display, telling species apart, that sort of thing with the horned dinosaurs.
And with the club-tail dinosaurs, I like to think of them kind of like cows. So they would have been close to the ground, eating lots of plants off of the ground. And I also like to think of their tail clubs, sort of the way that horses use their tails to swish away flies, except the flies they were swishing away were large tyrannosaur dinosaurs. So they definitely would have used their club tails for defense.
Remodeled fractures on lower limb bones of some dinosaurs. So we think that club was a very effective weapon.
I am never going to complain about mosquitoes again with that comparison. Wow, just imagine. Got a question here from Amy. How long does it take for bones to become fossilized? And maybe expand on that a little bit for our audience. Like, how does that process work?
That is kind of, it's an undecided topic right now. Generally, it's about 10,000 years for a fossil to happen. But there are things like down at Mammoth Hot Springs in Yellowstone, there's that hot spring water that's bringing up mineral-rich waters, and it's being absorbed into those trees, and they're being fossilized in the matter of years. Usually here, these dinosaurs were being buried in the sediment, and then there was mineral-rich waters flowing through, and there's lots of iron and manganese in the source rocks, so there would be lots of that dissolved in the water. And since the calcium in the bone is more soluble than the iron and the manganese, it would go into solution in the water and be replaced by the iron and manganese. So it's kind of an atom by atom replacement. So you retain all the features of the bone, but then it slowly gets transformed into a more like a rock.
Wow, fascinating. Hedaya asks, Noreen asks a question. How do you glue the bone pieces together? So when you have a fossil like the first skull that you showed us, where it's not intact, it's pieces, how do you put them all together?
Sometimes, I don't know if you noticed in some of the places on the face there, there's that lighter patches where you're filling in gaps. That's a 2-part epoxy putty. So it's 2 bits, and it's kind of like a silly putty that we mix together and fill in the cracks. But usually what we use is a glue called Paraloid B72. That's a little plastic resin, little bead dissolved in acetone, and we can make it at various concentrations, and it soaks in and helps to harden the bone, and can also be used to glue pieces back together as well. So generally when you're gluing fossils, you want the place where it's broken to be weaker than the bone, so that if it is to break again, it'll break on that same spot, and you can just glue it back together rather than breaking somewhere else, and then you're losing information every time that bone breaks. So if it's gonna break again, it's better to have it break at the same spot. So it's a kind of a little bit weaker glue, but it's very sturdy and works very well. It's been well tested.
Again, that also sounds like a very delicate process.
Mm-hmm.
So how much, as a paleontologist yourself, how much work would you say is done preparing fossils in the lab compared to the Indiana Jones-esque, sorry for a young audience, trying to find the fossils in the field?
Usually it's summers in the field, and then we have the fossils in the lab, and it can be anywhere from days to weeks to that nodosaur specimen that's on display at the Tyrrell Museum, Borealopelta, that was found up north of Fort McMurray. That was a really soft bone and a really hard rock. And the technicians spent about 5.5 years, or about 7,000 hours, just on that one dinosaur. So it can really vary depending on how hard the bone itself is and what kind of rock it's in. So.
Wow, that it is a passion, obviously, as well as a job. Cool. Now Lily is asking us a lot of questions, so we may have a budding future paleontologist here. She asks the very important question: how many years ago did dinosaurs become extinct?
That was about 66 million years ago. A meteorite, big meteorite, hit the Yucatan Peninsula, sent up a bunch of debris into the atmosphere, and it caused some big climactic changes. The plants died off. Plant eaters didn't have enough food, so they died off, and then the meat eaters didn't have enough food. So only the really small animals that were around at the time managed to survive that mass extinction about 66 million years ago.
Wow, 66 million. That is a big, big number. Segan, and hopefully I'm saying that name correctly, asks, how many sets of teeth does that dinosaur have? That was fairly early on, so that's maybe our very first specimen, the big skull that you started off with. How many sets of teeth would that one have had?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but they're constantly being replaced throughout their life, and they're still figuring out how long dinosaurs lived for even. So that sort of information is not really well known. There's at least 10 years for sure. Some of the oldest, one of the oldest ceratopsians that has, as of a few years ago, had been aged at. So, and they're constantly replacing their teeth. So it would depend on how quickly they're wearing out and being replaced. But the duck-billed dinosaurs could have had thousands of teeth in their mouth at any one time with that big dental battery.
So you can see that there's one row of teeth, two rows of teeth, and a third row of teeth that we can just see here on the chewing surface for this dinosaur. But there's a ton more teeth growing in behind it already. So it's really hard to give you an exact number, but a lot for sure.
So those are two different species of dinosaurs, those two examples. Then can we assume from that that all dinosaur species replace their teeth continuously? Or is that the case? Are they? Because I think sharks do that, if I'm correct. I don't have a biology background, but I seem to remember that one. So, but is that a trait of all dinosaur species?
Yep, all the ones that we know about. The plant eaters were often eating tough vegetation, so that was wearing down their teeth. The meat eaters were biting into limbs with bones in them, so they could easily break their teeth. If you broke all your teeth as a meat eater, it would be pretty tough to feed. So they would be also replacing their teeth as well. Remember on that jaw that Lois showed, there were the teeth of various sizes in the jaw. So
there were dinosaurs though that didn't have any teeth. They had toothless beaks, which is pretty cool. So sort of like our modern birds. So like the Ornithomimid that was found here probably wouldn't have been replacing its teeth since it had none.
Interesting. So got a question here from Thomas, who says, we go as a family every year to Dinosaur Provincial Park in hopes to find a fossil. Yay. Also, great thing to do. How can we tell the difference between a rock and a fossil?
So there are three things we look at. If we find something in the Badlands and we're wondering, is this a fossil or just a really cool rock? So one thing we look for is shape. Sometimes we'll find a fossil looks just like a chicken bone or a dog bone that your dog might be chewing, like a cow bone. So we'd look for shape or certain features about this specimen. We'll look at texture. A lot of fossilized bones, I don't know if we can see it in here, but often they'll have a really bubbly texture, kind of like an Euro chocolate bar.
The resolution is showing up there.
So shape, texture, and color. Again, this fossil that David is holding up is a pretty typical color for our fossils, but our fossil color is determined by what minerals are in the water when it's hardened. So if my suspected fossil passes the color, shape, and texture test, then usually I'll taste it and see if it tastes like a dinosaur. No, not really. But I will do what we call the lick test. You can lick your cleanest finger, hold it to the flat side of a fossil and count to 5. And usually that fossil is going to stick to your finger. Now don't be fooled. Sometimes the rocks will also stick, so don't lick all the rocks you see. But that's how we tell, generally speaking.
So sounds like you can also tell who's a paleontologist because they're the ones going around licking rocks.
Yes.
Strange, but there you go. Now, what is the status of fossils? If I'm at a place like Dinosaur Provincial Park and I find a fossil like that example lying on the ground and it passes the test and I lick it, which I don't know if I would, but some people might, is it mine because I found it, or is it more complicated than that?
That's a fantastic question. So the fossils that we have here in the province of Alberta belong to every Albertan, which is really cool. So that means when you find a fossil, it doesn't belong to you. Depending where you collect it, sometimes, or where you find it, sometimes you can collect it and you can be its caregiver, but most of the time it's a way better idea just to take GPS coordinates and let a paleontologist know. So the Royal Tyrrell Museum, they have a phone number that you can phone and tell them where you found this fossil. Here at Dinosaur Provincial Park, we're also a provincial park. So everything within the park boundaries is protected. So that means all of our fossils, our rocks, our plants, our animals get to stay here in Dinosaur Provincial Park. So we ask people not to remove or disturb any fossils they find, just leave them in the ground. We have a little thing, you can come to the visitor center and fill out a fossil finder form with your name and your email and any pictures you might have of the fossil. And we'll get back to you and let you know what the paleontologists think it is and if they've collected it or not.
Oh, thank you. Excellent. Hey, got a history question. Oh, sorry, David.
If you may have seen in the news recently, there was a kid who found some bones in Horseshoe Canyon and reported it to the Tyrrell Museum, and it's a juvenile hadrosaur, as I recall. So it's one that we don't have a lot of information about. So it's great that they recognized the bones and then properly reported it to the museum. So.
And got in the newspapers and on the internet and stuff as a result. So if nothing else, you get 15 seconds of fame, right? So what year was the first Albertasaurus found? Crystal has sent us that question.
So the first dinosaur fossil that was found in Alberta was a skull of what became Albertasaurus. It was found in 1884. It wasn't officially named until 1905. And it was named in the same paper as Tyrannosaurus Rex was. And it was found in the Drumheller area.
So now we've got yourselves at Dinosaur Provincial Park. The Tyrrell is kind of close by. That's the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller. If we were looking at, say, a map of all of Alberta, that obviously is the place, the hotbed for dinosaurs in this province. But is that the only place where dinosaurs would have lived in what is now Alberta?
No, they're in many other places. I've worked on digs south of Medicine Hat. There's lots of finds in Edmonton. There was a number of years ago, they were digging a new sewer line in Edmonton, and they found some Albertasaurus bones and teeth as they were digging underground there. Up by Fort McMurray, there's that new museum, the Philip J. Currie Museum, and they've got a bone bed up there that they have a lot of specimens from.
In my hometown of Lethbridge, there's a really cool ammonite quarry where they take out sort of round shells from a squid-like creature, and on occasion they find dinosaurs there as well.
Oh, cool. That's good to know. So the fossils could be anywhere, is what I'm hearing from that. Very exciting. All right, here's a question from Kelly, Mariana is wondering, what is the oldest fossil in the museum and how old is it?
That's a good question.
It looks like that's a really good question.
They're all about 70. The Dinosaur Park formation is 76 to 74.5 million years old. And we have some clamshells here from right in the Old Man Formation, which is a little bit older. So all the specimens here in the museum range from the upper Old Man into the Dinosaur Park Formation. So they're all pretty close in age, relatively speaking, within a span of 2 million years. You know.
Only 2 million years. But I guess a question to go with that is, what length of time did what we speak of as dinosaurs live on the earth? Because it's incorrect to believe that they all live together all at the same time, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they appear in the Triassic about the same time. Mammals and dinosaurs appeared about the same time. Dinosaurs really took off, and they were on the landscape for about 180 million years. So interesting thing to think about, Tyrannosaurus Rex is closer in time to us than it is to Stegosaurus. which lived in the Jurassic.
Wow. Okay. So that leads actually to a question that's come from Evelyn from Prince Edward Island, if I'm understanding correctly. So, which must mean it's almost bedtime for Evelyn out there. Maybe not. Why did the T-Rex have tiny arms?
They were putting most of their effort into their bite force in their skull. And so there was a lot of weight there with the skull. And if you have a lot of weight on your head and then you have big arms, you're going to be falling forward all the time. So they worked at kind of reducing their arms and more focusing on their skull for attack. That way they were still nicely balanced with their tails.
Interesting. Cool. Okay. Here's an interesting question from James. Does the Megalodon count as a dinosaur?
A megalodon is a shark. So it's a fossil animal, but it's not a dinosaur, it's a shark.
So then there are creatures that lived at the same time as dinosaurs that don't count as dinosaurs. Is that right?
Correct. But also Megalodon was much more recent, closer in time than
Okay.
there's the extinction of the dinosaurs. So didn't live at the same time.
So then what is it that makes a dinosaur? Really, this is a simple question, I can see. What is it that makes a dinosaur as opposed to something else that was living at that time?
Oh my goodness, that's a really difficult question, actually.
Sorry.
But the best way that we can explain it is that an animal that had its legs underneath its body like this, rather than beside its body like this, and it lived on the land. So there were no dinosaurs swimming in the ocean, and they all had their legs under their body like this.
Oh, cool. Okay. And Fiona, when you did that with your arms, that made me imagine or picture a crocodile or an alligator because their legs are like that, correct?
Yeah.
Good, good, good. How about this? Here's a question from Crystal. I'm going to expand on it a little bit. Where else did dinosaurs live?
Dinosaurs lived all over the world. There have been dinosaur finds on every single continent, including Antarctica. So they're all over the world.
So when they lived in Antarctica, how did they deal with the cold? I mean, that's the coldest place on Earth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the climate of the world was a lot warmer back then. There were no polar ice caps at the time. During the late Cretaceous, there weren't. Actually, maybe the whole time of the dinosaurs. Anyway, but definitely the late Cretaceous, there were no polar ice caps, so the climate was a lot warmer. And so they did still have to deal with the long polar winter being total darkness, but somehow they did manage to do that. But they didn't have to deal with as cold a temperatures as we have today.
Hey Dave, do you think there were any glow-in-the-dark dinosaurs living in Antarctica in the Cretaceous period?
Probably not. They're pretty tough to hide if you're glowing in the dark.
Maybe. Interesting. So I've got a question that's come to us from YouTube from a cat and a catfish. What's the name? I don't know. That asks, did the Quetzalcoatlus live in Canada?
We do have specimens, examples of it that have been found in Canada. It was a huge flying reptile that was not a dinosaur, and it traveled all over, and there's evidence of it has been found here. We have a cast of a neck vertebra of Quetzalcoatlus on display here that was found in Dinosaur Provincial Park.
Cool. Arav is wondering, how smart were dinosaurs?
Well, dinosaur brains were pretty small, and that's usually a fairly good indication. So comparing the size of a brain to the size of a whole body is usually a really good way to tell how smart something is. Dinosaur brains were pretty small. So we had a dinosaur that was about the size of a medium-sized house dog named Stegosaurus. It's a type of pachycephalosaur, and it has a big dome on its head that it would have used for bumping heads with other dinosaurs. But it's commonly also known as walnut brain. Its brain was about the size of the end of my thumb, so it probably wasn't that smart of a dinosaur at all. And we know this because we can find the brain case on the inside of the skull of these animals. and we can sort of figure out how big the brain that fit inside that little case would have been. For the most part, not very big.
But I mean, that's really a pretty tricky question, because what counts as smart? You know, they're probably much better at dinosauring than any of us would be, I'm thinking.
That's
But
true.
they probably couldn't do math.
They survived on Earth for a really long time.
Yeah,
So
right. So there's a smartness to that. Absolutely. Eric wants to know, how big is the largest dinosaur ever found?
Lois
Lois
mentioned it.
mentioned it in her game.
I did. Argentinosaurus would have been 30 to 40 meters long. That's a long animal.
So that's one of those long neck dinosaurs, a sauropod. So it would have had a hugely long neck and a really long tail, but 30 to 40 meters is really big.
That's really big. Wow. And what did they eat?
They were plant eaters. So they were munching on lots and lots of plants.
That is amazing to think that the biggest things just were eating salad.
Mhm.
It's a good way to.
I don't know if there's a lesson in there for our elementary school students that if you want to get big, eat your salad. Just saying. Isaiah asks, do you have an Indoraptor fossil? And I don't know if I said that correctly.
Indoraptor was a fabrication from Jurassic World. So it was one where they took parts of different dinosaurs and genetically modified it. So Indoraptor was not a real dinosaur that we have any fossils of. No, I'm thinking of Dominus Rex. Indoraptor. No, that would be China.
We have raptors like this guy. This is Dromaeosaurus. They were kind of like Velociraptor, probably kind of like Indoraptor as well.
Interesting. Okay. From Varsity Acres School, we have a question. When did the Triceratops live? What period of time?
It was in the late Cretaceous, right at the end of the Cretaceous period. It's about 66 to 68 million years ago, right along Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Okay. And I'm beginning to realize, wow, audience, we have so many fantastic questions. Scrolling through them, I don't know if we'll be able to get through all of them, but we're trying. But so many awesome questions. This clearly is a topic that people just absolutely love. So maybe what I'll do is quickly throw in if we don't have time to answer all of the questions today, I wonder how we could get those answered. Hey, could people come out and talk to you guys at Dinosaur Provincial Park?
Absolutely. So Dinosaur Provincial Park is just a little bit sort of northeast of Brooks, Alberta. The park itself is open all year round, and we have lots of interesting trails that you can walk all by yourself. And there's lots of interesting things that you can see, including fossils, while you're out here by yourself. During the summer and this year until the end of November, we also have tours. So you could come and see myself or Lois or Dave or any of our fantastic colleagues, and we could take you into a very special part of the park called the Natural Preserve. While we're out there, we'll definitely see dinosaur bones, and you can ask as many questions as you want. So you can find more information about our tours at dinosaurpark.ca. That would be a really good place to go and look for those. But if you have questions and you don't live in Alberta, or you can't make it out to Dinosaur Provincial Park, we also have a Facebook page. So you can ask us any questions on there that you might have, and we would be really happy to answer them.
Excellent. Now, I can speak from personal experience in being on a couple of those tours, going out to the Centrosaurus bed, for example, just amazing. And you know, the fact that you can step on fossils accidentally and realize like, whoa, they're absolutely everywhere. It's an incredible experience. Second question here from Varsity Acres. Have any living dinosaurs been found?
Ooh, yes. So during the big extinction event 66-ish million years ago, 75% of all life on Earth went extinct. But there was a very interesting small dinosaur that did survive, and that evolved into our modern birds. So every time you look out your window or you go for a walk and you see a bird flying overhead or sitting in a tree, you're actually seeing the descendant of the dinosaurs, a modern dinosaur.
that just makes it so much more fun to walk outside and look around at the birds, especially when you see like little flocks of magpies bouncing around. Just imagine them all as like little raptors, like those guys behind you.
I like to think of the chickens as the descendants of the dinosaurs walking around.
So then what kind of sounds would dinosaurs have made if they're kind of related to what we have as birds today? Because they don't roar, they don't growl.
With some dinosaurs, it's a little bit easier to tell than with others. So with the dinosaur, like this big one behind me, the Lambeosaurus, it had a big crest on the top of its head, and that crest was hollow. So we think, or paleontologists believe, that it would have been able to vibrate air around in its crest and make sort of a trumpeting sound. So that would have been pretty loud and pretty fantastic. But with other dinosaurs, it's a little bit harder to tell. So it's fun to imagine a T-Rex stomping around sounding a bit like a chicken or a magpie or a chickadee, but it's pretty hard to tell just from the fossil record what sound they would have been making.
Got a question here from Trish. How do dinosaurs get their names? Because I have a really hard time saying them. You guys are obviously very well skilled at this, as are kids in grades 1 to 3. I'm always amazed by them. They can just rattle them all off. But where do these crazy names come from? Like, why don't they just call them like Bob or Steve or something like that?
Yeah, so there's a variety of ways that dinosaurs get named. Sometimes they're named for anatomical features, like Styracosaurus means spiky lizard. You can guess where that was called the spiky lizard. Other times they're named after the person that discovered it. So there was a dinosaur called Wendy Ceratops. It was found by a woman named Wendy. She's an amazing fossil finder from southern Alberta here. Sometimes they're named on where they're found. Other times, there's one that I heard of, and I don't remember the genus name, but the species name is Knopfleri. So the people who were researching the fossil were big Dire Straits fans. So they named it after Mark Knopfler. So there's a whole sort of bunch of rules about naming dinosaurs. You can't name something after yourself, but someone else can name it after you.
And a lot of the complexity in the names comes from scientists really liking the language Latin and us not being super well versed in Latin. So it's hard to pronounce things sometimes, but it's okay if you mispronounce them because nobody really knows.
Okay, well, that leads to a question, and I've scrolled past it. I've forgotten I've lost the name to who asked the question. But how do you become a paleontologist? And do you need to learn Latin as part of it?
You do get a bit of Latin training during your training. I have a Bachelor of Science in Paleontology. So I went to the University of Alberta. They're one of the few that has an undergraduate paleontology program. Usually to be involved in research, you need at least a master's or a PhD. So a master's would be another 2 years. And then a PhD is usually 4 years on top of that. And there are a lot more universities that do the graduate level studies for paleontology. But oftentimes, if you're not able to get into a direct paleontology program, you could do a general science program that has a combination of geology and biology. So you're learning about the animals and how they lived, and then you're also learning about rocks. So there's important things to know about for paleontology.
Fantastic. Well, and we're fortunate to live in a place where we can go out and learn from experts in the field, people doing it. Related question, how many paleontologists work at the museum with you guys?
Well, here we don't have any researching paleontologists, but there are crews from the Tyrrell Museum that come down. There's been, in the last couple of years, it's been mainly 2 of them that have been coming down, but there were 8 at one point at the Tyrrell paleontologists. I'd have to think about that and who else.
We've got some really, really tough questions coming through. So you guys are doing a fantastic job of answering them. I can't keep up on this end. So, so we've got about 5, maybe 4 more minutes left. I'm going to keep rapid firing with you guys, if that's okay with you. Blake is wondering if it's possible for dinosaurs to come back in the future.
I mean, I've watched Jurassic Park. I don't know about you guys. I don't think it's a fantastic idea. There have been scientists, though, that disagree with me. And because birds are the descendants of dinosaurs, they have all of the dinosaur genes in their DNA. So some paleontologists have decided it's a fun idea to start to work at that DNA and try to make chickens with teeth in their beaks and with bones in their tails. So there are people who think it's possible to bring dinosaurs back to life.
Because Regina asks, what would the Earth be like if dinosaurs and humans lived together? Would that be?
It would be a scary place.
I wonder if we could train them like dogs. That would be surprising, but hey, who knows?
Little ones might be okay. Yeah, that would be interesting. Cool. Because humans did not share the Earth with dinosaurs, correct?
Correct.
When we see cartoons and comics that have caveman and dinosaurs together, that is false, correct?
65 million years of time separating modern humans and dinosaurs.
That's a really, really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've got a question about lifespans of dinosaurs. Not all dinosaurs together, but individual dinosaurs, like Triceratops, for example. I think that was the actual question. How long did a Triceratops live? Do we know?
Our scientists are working on figuring that out still. So they, as the dinosaurs are growing, you get these lines, kind of like tree rings in their big leg bones. And so there was a talk I heard a few years ago, and the oldest ceratopsian horned dinosaur wasn't a Triceratops, it was a Centrosaurus. But the oldest they had conclusively aged on that one was 10 years old. And things get a bit tricky because after it reaches adult size, there's a little bit of remodeling that happens, so you don't get clear rings still preserved in the limb bones. So there are people going back and looking at various sizes and trying to figure out growth rates so that they can extrapolate by looking at, okay, this bone is this big around at the middle and it's this long. So then we can guess that it was about this age, but there's still lots of work on that being done right now. And I haven't heard much about it recently, but it's in the works.
So obviously paleontology, the studying of dinosaurs, is we don't have all the answers. So it's the type of field where there's lots and lots and lots to learn and keep learning.
For sure, yeah. There's lots to still learn and figure out, and lots of the smaller dinosaurs we don't really know much about here at Dinosaur Provincial Park. Like the things that we know really well from complete skeletons are all the really big dinosaurs like the Lambeosaurus. But yeah, a lot of the smaller dinosaurs, and there's all sorts of behavior and all sorts of things to learn from dinosaurs.
Awesome. Okay, so I think I'll make this our last question, if this is okay with you guys. This is a question from Crystal. And again, to all of the questions that I haven't been able to get to from our audience, thank you so much for all of these questions. We're going to have to refer you to the team at Dinosaur Provincial Park in person or Facebook again to get answers to more of these questions. But our closing question: do dinosaurs have the same numbers of bones as humans?
That is a great question.
No,
Isn't it?
Highly variable. Centrosaurus, Styracosaurus have about 314. Humans have 206.
Okay, so do all dinosaurs, so I'm going to ask one more, sorry, I'm breaking my own rules here. Do all dinosaurs have the same number of bones?
It'll be highly variable.
Okay.
So dinosaurs have lots of vertebrae in their tail, but some of them have funny horns on their faces. Some of them have different numbers of toes on their feet or different numbers of ribs. So it is, yeah, definitely highly variable. And then of course we've got all of the teeth, which can vary quite a bit.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, Fiona, David, and Lois, so that we don't take up all day, well, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. So many questions, and thank you so much for your answers. I want to get out there this weekend again. I'll be honest. It's that much fun to me. But thank you very much. I should give you the opportunity to close off, say your final words, few sales pitches and such.
All right, like we mentioned, we're here this weekend and until the end of November. The visitor center as well will be open, so you can come and see all of these fantastic skeletons live and in person. So do check our website at dinosaurpark.ca. That's the best way to figure out what's available when you come down to the park. We definitely hope to see you in the park, whether it's this season or next season or in the future sometime. The dinosaurs will still be here for you. We love answering questions, so definitely reach out to us as well. But we'd like to say thank you so much for all your fantastic questions and for spending a little bit of your morning into the afternoon with us. We really appreciate your time and all of the fantastic things that you've asked us today. So here from Dinosaur Provincial Park on Treaty 7 land, we would like to say thank you and farewell.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Awesome, team. Thank you very much for your time. And to our audience, thank you all very much for tuning in and joining us today. We've appreciated so many fantastic questions and look forward to connecting with you all with future live streaming events here from Telespark. So from us at Spark and from the team at Dinosaur Provincial Park, thank you very much and have a fantastic rest of your day.